not in Africa, they're elsewhere. Because what has been discovered, before we come to Egypt, let me deal with something that is significant. What has been discovered is that you do not have any Europeans on the earth until about 55,000 years ago. And those Europeans are black. Pink people, that is people who drop pigmentation, do not occur until around that time when the blacks in Europe, and that has been established, that there are no people on the earth except black people, not just in Africa, because in Africa produced 6 stages of man. All the stages of man are found in Africa. Only 3 of those stages are found in Europe and Asia. The first 3 stages died off in Africa. They never got anywhere. The last 3 stages not only spread across Africa, but moved out into Europe and Asia. We have finally Neanderthal man, which is not complete man, also African, but with the lobe of the brain missing, the seat of conscious, not necessarily of consciousness, but of the higher type of consciousness which we have. Then we have final man, Homo sapiens sapiens. And scientists in 3 independent universities at Berkeley in California, in Hawaii, and at Oxford University of all places in England have shown that the founding population of the modern world, not just the first man, that's irrelevant. The first man being born in Africa doesn't mean anything because the first man was not modern. The first man did not have our brain. What they have found is the last man was born in Africa, not just the first. Modern man. What scientists have recently discovered as a result of the study of DNA polymorphisms is that all man now living on this planet is descended from a black woman who lived about 140,000 years ago. The African actually contains all the genetic material. And they know at what point he begins to mutate into other types. That mutation has nothing to do with evolution of other types. It has to do with changes brought about by ecological conditions. For example, it is understood that hair follicles are affected by heat and cold. Where there is great heat, hair tends to be short so as to allow heat to escape. Where there is great cold, heat tends to be long in order to protect the neck from cold. Coloration is produced by the dropping of pigmentation. In the ice, somewhere near southwestern Russia, the African was caught in the ice. There are no Europeans, meaning that is, there are no Caucasians in Europe at this stage. During the warm interstadial, there are only black people in Africa, in Europe, and in Asia. Eventually, however, as a result of the Ice Age, black people who produced albino types, which is a mutation which does not survive easily in Africa because albinos do not have protection, melanin protection against the sun, and are destroyed very quickly, but in the ice it became an advantage. So that albino type became the dominant type. The black type did not totally disappear in Europe. Thus, when England was invaded by the Romans, they found one of the Roman generals noted, Pliny remarks on it, that the Roman general noted that there were some black people in Britain, actually native to Britain, black people living among the pink skin types, so that sometimes pigmentation was retained. You also find pigmentation retained among the Eskimos because pigmentation became a disadvantage in the ice, not in temperate zones which we live in now, but in the ice, because you could not easily mineralize the bones if you had a screen against the sun, because the sun did not come in easily into the skin in the ice age. So that you have to have something that would enable the most of the sun to come into the skin. Hence, melanin became inactive in types which later became called Caucasoid or Cro-Magnon. Now, other changes began to occur, things like the narrowing of the nose, because now a narrow nose breathes more freely in the ice. The broader expansive nose is more adapted to tropical regions. This thing has nothing to do with inferiority or superiority. These are merely the responses to ecological imperatives. What has happened, however, over the centuries, particularly the slave trade, has placed certain values, certain properties, and certain people with dark skin and light skin. These are the later myths of man. They have nothing to do with science. And we have built whole cultures upon them. Even a person's life can hang upon